Hi, Josh from Porter Square Books, back in my fiction section, between two squids, I guess. I've also added a little decor, fancying the place up. And I mean business today because I am wearing my action cardigan. And cardigans, of course, mean serious book business. So I'm going to talk a little bit about and read from a book that I think is both a great book in and of itself and a work that speaks powerfully to the experience that we are having right now in this very uncertain and unstable time, while at the same time looking forward to and maybe pointing away towards what could come next and what the new normal might be and what a better normal could be. So I'm going to be talking about and reading from I, Hotel by Karen Tei Yamashita. Yamashita is the author of, among other things, Tropic of Orange, which is like a magical realist, Grapes of Wrath, but it's Mexico to Los Angeles instead of Oklahoma, and there's a traffic jam. This is one of the most beautiful passages in literature I've read, and there's also a mythological luchador wrestling match, as tends to happen in magical realist Grapes of Wrath. She's also written Brazil Maru, which is a historical fiction examining the Japanese immigrants to Brazil and what it means to create a new world for yourself, and also how nonsensical the idea of the great man is. She's got a new book coming out soon, a collection of short stories called Sansei and Sensibility that contains a couple of real monster masterpieces of short fiction and some short stories that reimagine the novels of Jane Austen in the Sansei, the Japanese-American community in California specifically, written in part because her sister is a massive fan of Jane Austen and she wanted to understand that. But today, we're talking about I, Hotel. I'll be reading a little bit from I, Hotel. I, Hotel is set from 1968 to 1978, right in the kind of heart of the civil rights era. It's set in San Francisco, and it uses this building, the International Hotel, as its kind of center of gravity. The I Hotel had a number of different incarnations over the years. It was like a boarding house, something that was like an equivalent to a YMCA. By the time it was taken over in a kind of urban renewal real estate grab, it was essentially like a retirement home for immigrant men who had been kind of laborers their whole lives. It's also very stylistically innovative. Obviously, there are plenty of passages that have just kind of regular, straightforward prose. But it also has passages that are like screenplays, including some that actually even have like production directions and notes. This is for, I believe, a fictional documentary. It also includes actual comics. Where'd you go? With panels and gutters and everything. Thank you, Scott McCloud. But it even goes even further to what is one of my kind of favorite series of pages, which is this, which is Yamashita's attempt to render into written language what is a kind of audio, visual, musical, experimental art piece. I don't know if great American novels exist. I'm not sure that's a real thing. But if there were, I would put I think you'd have to consider I, Hotel as one of those great American novels. And Yamashita is certainly one of the great living writers and most important American writers of kind of our early 20th century. So the reason I'm reading from I, Hotel today is because there are lots of characters in the book, but the hero of the book actually isn't a person. It's an idea. There are lots of characters who kind of bear the weight of the protagonist over the course of the book, who kind of fill that role and kind of move things in that way. But it's actually an idea that does most of the work towards resolving the conflicts, moving the plot towards better things, moving the characters towards better experiences. And that idea is community. The idea that there is inherent value created when we do things together, and that you actually don't even need to create something for that coming together to have value. The sum is greater than the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. All of our triumphs are more triumphant when we're in this together. All of our sorrows are easier to bear when no one is bearing them alone. And you kind of see this illustrated most starkly when the characters drift from that idea. When that kind of train of social progress starts to kind of get off the tracks, is usually when the characters or the groups of characters are finding ways to separate themselves. This is not to kind of dismiss debates about differences or ideological differences or people just being flat out wrong, but Yamashita always finds a way to remind us that, as important as those are, the goal of all of those is to come to something stronger together. And I think that's important to hear in our times today. I think it's important to think about what is coming next. You know, normal was all right for some of us, but it wasn't great for a lot of us, and it could be better for everyone. And I think Yamashita's presentation of the idea of community as a hero in iHotel is one of the ways to think about how we get to a better normal. So as I said, there are tons of characters. Some of them are historic, some of them are fictional. You got members of the Asian American civil rights movement that started cropping up then, Indigenous and First Nations, African American civil rights. There are Black Panthers. There's the whole list of leftists, Marxists, communists, socialists. There are artists who kind of circle and move in throughout all of these different social liberation groups, feminists, of course. And but we actually start with a young man, a kind of a moment of his life that is formative, but not necessarily in the ways that you think they're going to be. I want to say something else before I start reading from chapter 1. When I read this on Instagram Live, I did an Instagram Live of this a week and a half ago. What is time? Yeah, that sounds right. I had forgotten how iHotel starts before I started reading. And it actually starts with a funeral. And when you think about a book that is so much about life, but also about transformation and moving into the future and kind of the conflicts that come along with those, it makes perfect sense to start with a funeral. And in fact, it's what Paul, the character I was just talking about, it's the death of his father. That ended up being a little tough for me while I was reading. I didn't expect that. I forgot about that. Paul's father is described in specific ways, so he is a fully formed character as much as can be in the space that we have. But Yamashita does it in such a way that whatever Paul's father's unique characteristic is, you immediately see what your father's unique characteristic is. That was tough for me, and that might be tough for you. So if it is, just kind of, I guess, join me in this this little mini community. We'll bear this together, so it won't be as hard for any of us. And if not, that's fine too. There's a lot else going on in this passage that you can kind of see where it's going and what I've talked about before. So I'll be reading from chapter 1. This takes place in 1968. Here's the front page. In this incarnation of the iHotel, it's the iHotel. One other thing Yamashita does is uses these kind of plans for those little paper cubes that you can fold up. And these are like narrative schematics. They express kind of the narrative spatial relationship between the entities in this section. And so I'm going to read a little bit from chapter 1, from the beginning of iHotel. 1. The Year of the Monkey. So I'm Walter Cronkite, Dig, and it's February 27th, 1968, and I'm saying the U.S. is mired in a stalemate in Vietnam, and you are there. But, whoa, let's back up 29 days to the Lunar New Year. Now, we know the Vietnamese call it Tet, but the Chinese own it. New Year, they call it. This year it's significant for Paul because on this night his dad grabs his heart like it's been anti-personnel mined with a BLU-43, what you call Dragon Tooth. Like it was waiting there in one of those jungle paths, waiting for someone to put his toe on the detonator and boom. There's firecrackers bursting all up and down Grant Avenue. So Paul can't hear his dad cry out, but he's walking behind through a narrow in the crowded festivities and the spitting lights glittering overhead only to stumble across his dad, crumpling into a laundry heap on the sidewalk. Bah, what is it? Bah has a vision before he passes, his big mistake and no atonement. When your mother died, he's gasping. For your sake, I should have married again. What are you talking about? Help! We need help! An ambulance! Just the two of us from that time on. Gasp. Good son. Only child. Move away! Give him air! Now, my son, I'm sorry. In the world all alone. Maybe he says this, maybe not. Paul can't hear him with all the explosions and the drumming. This Lunar New Year of the monkey, there's a float with everyone dressed like monkeys. They're scurrying around with their wire tails bouncing. Every day for 100 days, Paul tries to hear his father's last words. Maybe he said, "In the world, be strong." Every Chinese New Year for the rest of his life, he tries to hear his father's last words, and every year he will hear something different. Who's Paul? Just one of those sensitive Chinatown kids in high school, senior at Lowell, now orphaned. Isn't his the story of every kid in the year of the monkey, 1968? Every one of us will be orphaned this year, just that Paul knows it first, a midnight orphan on the Gung Hei Fat Choi. Who are we to know that our black daddy Martin with a dream and our little white father Bobby will take bullets to the brains? By the end of the year, we are monkey orphans, let loose, raising havoc. No daddies to pull the stops, temper the member, got those weird tails swinging from every rafter. We are free at last, brother, free at last. On the Tet, boys back in Vietnam about to be orphaned too. Got those helmets spinning snug at the chin, faces smudged like football defenders, hugging those rifles for a sneak attack, all in camouflage like the VC can't see him. Must be why more Vietnamese get killed than American boys. 58,000 to 3,895. Numbers for Vietnam are rounded off to the nearest thousand. Numbers for the boys are exact. You do the math, it's 15 to 1. We must have won. Saigon, Khe Sanh, and Hue, we get them all back. We get back the little places too, like Ben Tre and My Lai. At Ben Tre, an officer without a name says it became necessary to destroy it in order to save it. At My Lai, Charlie Company gets its orders. This is what you've been waiting for. Search and destroy, and you've got it. LBJ, the CIA, Westmoreland, McNamara, the Wiseman, they all say, let us wash our hands. Go quietly into that good night. Bye-bye. See you on Judgment Day. Judgment Day is here already for Paul's daddy. Wait a week to let the festivities die down. Keep daddy on ice at the Cathay Wah Sang, on Powell Street, over there near Jackson where the cable car makes its turn. How many ghosts hop the cable car to make the U-turn out of Chinatown? Paul makes 2 calls. One to Auntie and one to the Benevolent Association. And suddenly everything goes into action, like a finely tuned machine that cranks out tradition. My brother, what was he thinking? Auntie wails. He never went to the doctor. Me, I take my pills every day. Our father died the same way. Paul doesn't know what to say. Maybe it's his fault. Wasn't paying attention to the old man. But how old was he? Turning 65? He was supposed to live to 90. See Paul graduate college, get married, see his grandchildren. He was betting big time on his only son. Auntie's on the phone with the Cathay morticians. My brother only has one son, and he doesn't know anything about funerals. But why should he? He's only 16. I'm 18, Auntie. Ah, how time flies. But what does it matter? He still doesn't know anything. We're going to have to take care of all the details. Auntie, what details? She waves her hand at him and continues on the phone. You know my family. Well, everyone knew our father. A modest funeral, you understand. My brother was, well, why not say it, eccentric, but we are a traditional family. Yes, Ning Yung, that's right. Someone from the association will be in touch. I'll be there tomorrow in the morning. Yes, my nephew will come. After all, the son should be the one to choose. Auntie, choose what? And what about Ning Yung? Chinese cemetery in Colma. Don't worry, they'll take care of everything. They're professionals. Tomorrow, there'll be an obituary in the Chinese Times. Be sure you go and get a copy. Now come here. Auntie jumps up and Paul follows her, down the corridor to the study. They walk through and over the books piled with scattered newspapers on the floor. From the desk, she picks up Dad's reading glasses. She pulls one of his calligraphy brushes from a bamboo holder. Here, she says, handing the glasses and the brush to Paul. She scans the tall shelves of books that line every wall of the study. There are books in Chinese, English, and French. There's classical Chinese literature, painting, ancient and contemporary Chinese, Western and American history, philosophy, politics, and religion. The man could read. Books are open to selected pages, annotated in the margins, wedged in every cranny of available space in the room. And behind everything else, stacked in the corners, are painted canvases. Auntie throws her hands up. Hasn't been dusted in years. Scandalous. And marches out in disgust. Paul follows, obedient like a dumb puppy dog. Everything is the same as it's always been. He can't remember his mother's feminine touch, her tidy ways. It's all forgotten. He looks back at the torn leather on his dad's old reading chair, and the way the wood floor is worn from the chair to the desk. He sees his dad pacing back and forth from the chair to the desk. No dust there. Not one speck. But keeps following Auntie. She's on a mission down the corridor to his dad's bedroom. She freezes at the door. Their house is a bachelor pad, so it's a shock. Clothes everywhere, more books, more canvases, bed unmade. You can see the shape of his body in the wrinkled sheets. That's where Auntie finally loses it. My brother, you are gone, she weeps, grabbing the dark wood of the door frame and slipping down into abundant sorrow. Paul bows his head, stares down at his tears splattering his dad's reading glasses and calligraphy brush. Old ink gets bloody in young hands. Later, Auntie sits down in the kitchen, writes a list. 1 full set of clothing, including best suit. Don't forget socks and shoes. Reading glasses, brush, newspapers, mahjong set, bottle of French cognac. What else? His favorite things, like his favorite pen or favorite book. Pentax box camera. Okay, Auntie says, you have to find these things. If the clothes are dirty, you bring them to me tomorrow and I'll wash them. Remember, his best suit, the one he wears to, she pauses foolishly, funerals. Bring everything tomorrow. Maybe we need to get them dry cleaned too. Why the favorite things? We put them with him in his coffin to make his journey. Auntie, maybe he wouldn't want us to do this. But Paul can't help it. He yawns. He's been up all night in the study trying to read his dad's old letters. Maybe he didn't believe in the journey. What are you talking about? Camus? He suggests existentialism. Auntie huffs. What did he pump into your young mind? All that's irrelevant when you die in Chinatown. Yes, ma'am. All that's irrelevant when you die in Vietnam. To celebrate the Tet, 19 VC commandos charge through the walls of the U.S. Embassy compound in Saigon with anti-tank rockets. Marines hold them off until they get a helicopter of the airborne in to finish up the mess. When it's over, you've got 19 dead VC, 2 dead Vietnamese civilians, and 5 dead American boys. And we're watching the action all on TV, Dig, but that's just the embassy. The North Vietnamese have infiltrated the entire city, coming in on holiday with their ammo hid under flowers, rice, and vegetables. It's a peasant surprise. Presidential Palace, South Vietnamese Army Headquarters, Westmoreland's headquarters, radio station, and the air bases all attacked. Aircraft crippled, neighborhoods reduced to rubble, 2 million new refugees. Old Walter pulls you back to the map, and you see the DMZ line that marks north from south, and you say, hey, that's a long way from Saigon. What's the war doing down there in the deep south? Hey, Westmoreland, are we winning this war or not? And if we are, why are 26 hearts and minds bleeding there on the floor of our U.S. courtyard, what you call U.S. soil? By the time Paul's father's wake comes along, Saigon is a city under control. The war is pushed to the outside villages, which is easy because all they got to do now is destroy them. Like the lady at the front of the Cathay mortuary who is burning paper, Joss paper, otherworld paper, money paper, paper clothing, paper replicas of cars, televisions, houses, servants, everything going up in symbolic smoke and smoldering to send along with Dad in the next world. Paul can see the flames go up and smolder, reflecting off the shiny brass along the casket. The pungent smell of incense and burning paper swirls through the room. Paul's dad is dressed in his best suit, sleeping on a satin bed in a beautiful box with all his favorite things. Auntie and her husband and their 5 children and their children are all there. There are other cousins too, but Auntie says they are paper cousins. Do they count? If they're not careful, a lady in the front might grab them and send them up in symbolic smoke. The association's president is there. So are Paul's dad's office manager, the typesetter, and Mr. Fung, who practically does all the writing and photos for the newspaper. It's just a small operation. His dad's been publishing this local paper since his mother died, maybe 12 years ago. Auntie says her brother went to hide inside that paper, use it to publish what was in his mind. She doesn't say that no one reads it, at least she never did. She reads Mr. Fung's articles about events in Chinatown, but she never understood her brother's writing. All those complicated philosophical ideas of his. Well, his friends always said he was brilliant, and they got their brilliant writing in print too. Paper comes out once a week on Friday, so today's paper is a big photo with a full-page obituary. Readers maybe don't know the whole paper is Paul's dad, and maybe this is the last issue. Auntie folds a fresh copy and tucks it in with her brother. She inspects everything: can of tea, passport, reading glasses, calligraphy brush, bottle of French cognac. "Oh," she notices and says to Paul, "you found his old Pentax box camera." She approves. He loved that camera and took so many pictures with it. Then she notices the book resting on the satin. "What's this?" she asks. "Favorite book, you said," Paul mutters quietly. "Capital?" she whispers. Even Auntie knows Karl Marx. Yeah, it was the book he was reading these days." "Favorite?" "He always said the book he was reading was his favorite." Auntie's exasperated, but she smiles and looks around. She slips the book out and hugs the cover to her bosom. "Do you want to get us in trouble?" she squeaks, bowing 3 times. "But bow 3 times, she interjects. "Customary to do so," she instructs, and moves away with Marx under cover. Outside, she shoves the un-American book at Paul and hisses, "Get rid of this." Meanwhile, under cover of air and artillery blasting away at the fat walls of the citadel, Marines and assault craft ply the perfume river to its banks to take back the sacred city of Hue. Who will bow 3 times to bless the blood lapping at the shore? Next day at the funeral, Paul wears a black suit, a black waistband, and a black band on his left arm. The waistband means he's the oldest son. He knows people see it and think that's not all it means. He's too young to be wearing this waistband, too young to take his father's place. Now the Chinatown community files in, solemnly bowing 3 times, one by one, and filling the pews of the cafe. They've sent wreaths of flowers with ribbons naming the family, institution, or shop Paul's father did business with. And now Paul's got to be the oldest son, approach the casket to perform the blanket ceremony. If only there were other sons. A 3rd son to place the white blanket of heaven, a 2nd son to place the red blanket of life, a 1st son to place the gold blanket of spirituality splashed with red characters. If only there were 10 sons to place 10 blankets, to send his father warmly into his spirit life. But Paul's the only son, so he surreptitiously hides Karl Marx under the folded blankets, shrouds his father's traveling body with each eternal blanket, tucking the pay in to hide Dad's unfinished reading. Paul thinks, even if it's not his daddy's journey, it's their journey. Auntie's journey, Mr. Fung's, the benevolent associations, his father's writing buddies. It's their journey, dig. It might be Carl's too. Back of the hall, paper-burning ladies going at it with the matches. Could have given her his dad's entire library, plus his paintings. Burn it all up to heaven. Endless eulogies, 3 bows per person, and condolences take forever. But finally, the pallbearers get the casket out into the long hearse. They make Paul sit in the Cadillac convertible with a giant wreathed photo of his dad. The cafe brass band with 12 old white guys in maroon outfits starts with their signature tune, "Nearer, My God, to Thee," and marches in front of the convertible. Paul looks back at the hearse following. All the cars follow the hearse. He's on parade through Chinatown. Everyone on the street is staring at him in the giant photo. Does he look like a younger version of his dad? Chinese look to see if they recognize the guy in the photo. Kids run alongside the band and then the cad like it's the continuation of New Year's. And tourists snap their brownies. He can hear the tourists saying, "The band is playing Onward Christian Soldiers. Can you beat that in Chinatown? These folks are Christian too. Honey, is that yellow confetti they're throwing out of the cars? How festive." My white guy tourist. Hope you liked it. Paul grips his dad's photo, and hides behind it. Every nerve in his body electrocuted by an overloaded circuitry of grief and humiliation. Suddenly, he senses a presence at his side. Someone has jumped into the cad. They are going to stop at the Benevolent Association first, next the newspaper office, then your apartment. Paul looks at the man whose agile body leaped into the moving car. "I know this is highly irregular, but I thought you could use some company." Paul nods behind the photo, sucks in his breath, got to get his composure back. "I'm Chen Wang Guan," says the agile man, "friend of your father." He nods at the photo. He would hate all this. He looks around at the spectacle, but Paul finishes the thought. It's irrelevant when you die in Chinatown. He notices Chen's white gloves, so he's one of the pallbearers. Chen smiles. He always said you were a smart kid. The procession comes to a halt. Rest stop, Benevolent Association. His dad's ghost is halfway to heaven. Time to pay his last respects, eat some boiled chicken, a bit of steamed bun, maybe take a banana for the trip. We'll talk again later, I promise. Chen jumps out into the street, again like an acrobat. What did you put in that casket with your dad? It's really heavy. 2 more stops. The newspaper office on Clay Street and their apartment around the corner on Commercial. Auntie's planted someone there to open the doors. Make sure Paul's dad gets a good last visit, then shoo his ghost out. The doors on the back of the hearse get flung open. The mortuary director pulls out a wreath of flowers and stands at attention. The brass band plays another Salvation Army tune. Finally, they get to the edge of Chinatown. They might be a band of old white guys, but the edge of Chinatown is their limit. It's also the limit for the cad. Paul gets out and sits shotgun in the hearse with a burning cigar of incense. A motorcycle escort takes over. It's not that Paul has never left Chinatown, but it's always foreign out there. Chinatown's his citadel. But when you die, your bones got to travel 13 miles south outside the city to the Chinese cemetery in Colma. As Paul speeds away from Chinatown with his dad's spirit and favorite things, the boy and Vietnam are battling each other through the streets of Hue, house by house, block by block, hand to hand. Boys got to charge into buildings, tossing grenades, and wipe out the enemy room by room, meter by meter. Citadel is a concrete stone wall maze, sort of old-world castle city that American boys never see back home. Center is the Imperial Palace of Peace, surrounded by a city maze of side-by-side stone houses of the clergy, commoners, and bureaucrats. Boys got to put up the flag at the palace to show they won the battle, but first they got to get the tanks in there with special concrete piercing shells to blow out the thick walls. Got to destroy 10,000 homes and 40% of the city. Vietnam boys got their own map of trenches and tunnels and sniper positions. Time being, it's their citadel. Paul stares into the pit at the coffin, throws in his black armband and his black waistband. It peels away from his waist like a thick skin, exposing his guts for one horrific moment. Then, suddenly, the tension in his abdomen recedes. No one notices, it seems. Bow ties and white gloves flutter down to the casket. Once again, almost mysteriously, the agile friend of his father, Chen, is at his side. He, like the other pallbearers, tosses his bow tie and gloves, and now his ungloved hand rises to Paul's shoulder. Paul wants to cry out, but he cannot. Everything gets pushed down deep. He's still trying to hear, through the fireworks, his dad's last words. There's nothing but the soft din of juniper and flowers pelting dark wood. So that is the beginning of I, Hotel. I hope you've enjoyed the reading. I hope you've enjoyed me talking about books on video instead of shouting them at you at the store. Hope you find the books that you need in this time or want. And we hope to see you soon online and hopefully even sooner back at the store. Thank you all so much.